Hello, this is Sarah with Posh Pooch Designs, and today's video I'm going to be showing you how to make this bag. It's called my Fat Striped Bag. It makes a great tote or purse. It's all stitched in half double crochets, so you're going to get a nice tight stitch. Now the original pattern I wrote about 3 years ago, and it was done, as you saw in some of the pictures at the beginning of the video, in stripes of the cranberry and the cream. And so I thought it would be a lot of fun to use this same pattern, update and test the pattern, and then use the Bernat Pop. And this one is called Lipstick on Your Collar. It's got 2 shades of pink. Actually, it's kind of 3 shades of pink, because this is like a really, really light pink, and then 2 shades of gray in it, and it just works up perfectly with the stripes. And this is a great pattern to use for some of your long striping yarns, because it's a nice big bag. The bag measures about 14 inches this way and about 30 inches around, so it's about 14 or 15 this way and 14 to 15 this way, depending on how tightly you stitch. And like I said, this is a free pattern on my blog, and I'll put that blog link down there in the notes for you so you can check your stitch counts and things. It has a nice big 3-layer flower, and we're going to do that also. And it also has this nice big button, and this is one of my polymer clay buttons that I make. And you can use any button that you want, that you have on hand. I like nice big buttons because it's just a decorative button. It doesn't button or snap or anything. So it's just a nice decorative touch on our bag. And the bag is stitched long ways around, and then we fold it up, we stitch the sides, and then we do the top and the handle. This is a really, really easy, great beginner pattern if you want to learn to make a nice big project bag or bag purse. It makes a great carry-on on the plane. Anything like that, if you're wanting to learn to make a nice big bag, but you don't want to do a bunch of intricate stitches, but you want a bag that looks great, this is a fantastic pattern for that. Now we're going to be stitching today with our J-hook, and that's a 10mm. And all you're really going to need is about 7 to 8 ounces, depending on how tightly you stitch, which will be about 1.5 of these. But if you're going to do it in 2 different colors, of course you'll need about 3.5 to 4 ounces of your 2 colors. Because this is striped, we don't already in the yarn, we don't have to change colors. And so all you need is your J-hook, your Bernat Pop, and a fancy button, a needle for weaving in your ends, and a pair of scissors, and we're ready to go. So to get started, we're going to need to chain 62 chains. And someone asked me the other day when working with these cakes of yarn, do I pull from the outside or do I pull from the inside? And I haven't had any issues at all with just digging down in there and finding the end in the center. So I'm going to set that aside, and I like doing it where they're laying on the side like that, because then you can pull it right out of the center and it doesn't get snagged. Now, the way this pattern works is we're going to stitch 62 chains, because we're going to be going down and all the way up, and it folds in half in order to make the bag. So let me move that one. So we're going to begin with a slip knot. And then we're going to need to chain 60, let me check my notes again, 62 chains. And I'll make sure I tell you right. And one thing to remember when beginning a project like this, make sure that your beginning chain is a little bit loose. And if you tend to chain too tightly, for the beginning chain, you might want to go up a hook size, because you don't want it to be puckered on one side, because we're folding it in half. All right, so let's chain 62 chains. So I have chained my 62 chains. One thing to remember if you're following the written pattern is if you're using one of the Caron cakes or another yarn that you're not changing colors, just disregard the color changes. If you're using 2 different colors of yarn, you're going to have to change colors every 2 rows. For the Caron cake or the pop or the sweet cream, where it has the long color changes, we're not going to be changing colors. And so we're just going to disregard the color changes. All right, so like I said, I chained my 62, and we're going to begin in the 3rd chain from the hook, and every stitch is going to be a half double crochet. So we're going to count 1, 2, those first 2 count as our first half double crochet. Yarn over, we're going to go in the 3rd chain and pull up a loop. You'll have 3 loops on your hook. Yarn over and go through all 3 of those hooks, and that's a half double crochet. So the chain 2 counted as our first half double crochet, and then we did 1 half double crochet, and we're going to do 1 half double crochet in each stitch across our chain, and that will give us a total of 61 half double crochets. I stitched 1 half double crochet in each chain across, and because we're counting the first 2 chains as 1 half double crochet, you should have a total of 61 half double crochets. So now we're going to chain 2. I already chained 1, there's my second one. And the rest of this bag portion, you're going to stitch 1 half double crochet in each half double crochet for 34 rows. So the first 2 chains count as a half double crochet, so we're going to go in the next half double crochet and stitch a half double crochet. Yarn over, go through the chain, pull up a loop, yarn over, and go through all 3 of those loops on the hook. And we're going to do this all the way across, turn, chain 2, and we'll do this for 34 rows, and that will make the body of the bag. And you can see that you're getting a nice tight stitch because we're half double crocheting, and it's also nice and stretchy. That's one of the neat things about this bag is it's nice and stretchy, and you can just stuff it full of a lot of things. So 1 half double crochet in each stitch across, turn, chain 2, 1 half double crochet in each stitch across, turn, chain 2 for 34 rows. Now once you have completed your 34 rows across, you're going to get a big long rectangle, and you're going to put those 2 ends together like this. This is the bottom of your bag, and I've already done one side, and I'm going to show you how you do that. You're going to put the 2 sides together, and with your yarn, you're just going to go through those first 2 stitches and pull up a loop. Give yourself a little bit of a tail to tie off, because you want to make sure when we tie that off on the inside that you don't have a hole or anything. You want a little bit of room to put your needle on it, and just make sure you get a nice tight close on that corner. So let's chain 1, and then we're going to single crochet across, making sure that we gather both sides of our bag. So we're going to take our hook and go through the 2 loops on this side, and then we're going to go through the 2 loops on this side to join the 2 sides of our bag together. We'll pull a loop through, yarn over, and go through those 2 loops. And we'll do this all the way across our bag. Now remember, Don't stitch too tightly because you don't want the side of your bag to get puckered up. You want it to lay nice and flat. And so you might need to ease up your tension just a little bit. We'll just single crochet right up the side of the bag, joining the two sides of the bag together. Now I know that I didn't show you how to half double crochet every single row, and that's because it was just a repeat of 34 rows. Now remember, anytime watching a YouTube video, you can pause the video and come back to it, stopping and starting, watching it as much as you need to. If a video goes too fast, just pause. Rewatch that section over again. That's one of the great things about YouTube. So I'm almost up here to the end. Whoops, I got a little bit of a split. And that's one thing I have noticed about the Bernat Pop, is that the yarn can be a little splitty when stitching. And I didn't notice that at all on the Caron cakes. So, and this is, remember, Bernat Pop is 100% acrylic, where the Caron cakes are 80 acrylic and 20 wool. And that could have something to do with it. Alrighty, so we've single crocheted up. I'm almost to the end here. And that last stitch. On the first side, I started at the bottom, single crocheted all the way up, and then I tied off and I went ahead and tidied up by weaving in my end. Now on this end, we're not going to tie off because we're going to turn our bag, because this is the top of our bag. And you can see how wide this bag is. Isn't that luscious? I just love a nice big bag to put my things in. All right, so I'm going to stitch one more single crochet right up in that corner to make sure I got a nice join, and then I'm going to single chain one right there. And the next thing that we're going to need to do, that yarn ball out of the way there, is we're going to need to single crochet around the top opening of the bag. And the way we do that is we're going to place one single crochet in the end of each row. And we have 34 rows, right? And so we're going to put a single crochet in the end of this side for those 34 rows, and then we'll go around and do the same thing on this side. And this portion can be a little bit tricky, but don't let it trip you up. All right, so let's look at the end of our row. We're going to put our hook in, get our yarn, and single crochet. And then you can see that there's the end of that stitch there. When possible, go in a stitch rather than a hole. If you go in all the holes, you'll end up with a little bit of gaping, but sometimes you have to. And that's okay, just making sure that the next stitch you go in a hole, because we don't want any big gaping holes along our edge, because this is the edge we're going to stitch our top of our band, our bag band, onto. So what we'll do, we'll just continue on around, stitching one single crochet in the end of each of our half double crochet rows. Now remember, this is a little bit not tricky, but you're going to have to really look and think what you're doing. And if you're in the middle of watching a show, you may need to take a second and concentrate if you've not done this before. I do say this is it's an easy pattern, and it is pretty much a beginner pattern. But sometimes, you know, like in this area here, you may just have to take a second and really watch what you're doing, because this row here is very important for making the bag band portion lay correctly. So one single crochet in the top working all the way around the whole band of our bag. Then we'll join back over here to that chain 1 that we started with. As you can see, I have stitched a row of single crochet all the way around my bag opening. Now on this side where we have the seam, you just go around it, making your single crochets around that seam. Don't even worry about that. And then when we get back over here, we go around this seam also, and then we join to that chain 1 and chain 1. Now this row is going to be a decrease row. And the way we decrease is we single crochet in the first stitch, and then we single crochet the next 2 together, because we want to bring the band, the top of the bag, inward. Okay, so let me show you how that's done. So we're going to single crochet in the first stitch. So there's my single crochet. Then we're going to stitch these next 2 together. And the way we do that, single crochet decrease, or 2 single crochets together, it both means the same thing. You go in your next stitch and you pull up that loop. Then you go in the next and pull up a loop. You'll have those 3 loops on your hook. You yarn over and go through all 3. And what you did is you decreased 2 single crochets to 1. And we're going to repeat this all the way around the band. 1 single crochet in the next stitch, and then a single crochet decrease with the next 2 stitches. Single crochet and a single crochet decrease. When you see on a pattern that it says stitch 2 single crochets together or a single crochet decrease, it means the same thing. So we're going to 1 single crochet and then 2 single crochets together. And you can already see it's starting to pull the band in. And that's how we get the band smaller and that nice fat bag look on our bag itself. And I like a bag with a smaller opening, especially one that is more of a tote and is not going to have a zipper or something on the top. All right, so all the way around, 1 single crochet, 1 single crochet, decrease, alternating back and forth all the way around the top of our bag. I did my decrease row, joined to the top of that first chain 1 and chain 1. And we aren't going to do any more decrease rows. That was the only one, just to bring that in. And for the next 4 rows, we're just going to place 1 single crochet in each single crochet. Join and chain 1 for 4 more rows. I'm almost out of yarn here. I'm going to have to switch over to my next cake. Oh, trying to do half double crochet. All right, so 1 single crochet in each single crochet around our band for our purse or our bag, and we're going to do this for 4 rows. So just to repeat, 1 single crochet in each single crochet around, join to the top of that chain 1 and chain 1, and we'll do this for 4 more rows. This is how your bag should look for the band after those 6 rows. It pulls it in nice and tight. Now I have done 6 rows. If you want your band to be a little thicker, you can do a couple more rows if you want to. All right, so I just tied that off like this. And something that I like to do to kind of hide that is I'll pull that loop a little bit bigger. I'll go from behind put that loop on my hook and pull it into the underneath side and then tie it off. Whoops, came off my needle. There we go. I can weave that in later, but it doesn't have as much of a bulky end when we do it that way. So that's the bag band. We've got the bag finished and the band. And now we're going to do the handle. So let me set this aside. Grab a little bit more pink yarn here. Leave that one in there. All right, so for the handle, we're going to do it pretty much the way we did at the beginning. We're going to make a slip knot and chain 60. Now, if you want a longer handle, you can chain more. If you want a shorter handle, you can chain less. I liked this size because it fit nicely over my shoulder if I wanted to carry it that way. And then I can also carry it by the handle without it dragging the ground. And one thing about making handles with yarn, if you do like chain 3 and go back and forth, it makes a really stretchy handle, and it has the possibility of your handle stretching out. So by chaining 60 and then going back and forth with single crochets, you get a little bit tighter handle, because yarn handles do have a tendency to stretch out. All right, so that's the reason I chose to do the handle that way. So let's chain 60, and then we're going to turn and single crochet. All right, so after we've chained our 60, we're going to skip this first chain next to the hook, and we're going to begin stitching single crochets down the chain. Not the hook, the chain. All right, so we're going to go in that second chain from the hook, pull up our loop, and single crochet. And we're going to do this all the way down, and we're going to do this for 3 more rows for a total of 4 rows of single crochet. And this is a place where it's okay to stitch as tight as you want to. Well, not too tight, but tighter than you did probably for the bag, because you want your chains and your stitches to be nice and snug, because you are going to get some stretch, but remember, we don't want it to be too stretchy so that when you stick it on your shoulder or on your arm, it drags the ground. So 1 single crochet in each chain all the way down, chain 1 and turn, and repeat for 4 rows of single crochet, and that's going to make a nice sturdy handle. So I've stitched 4 rows of single crochet for a nice thick sturdy handle, and I'm going to tie off this end, and I'm going to leave a little bit of yarn to sew it onto the bag, and then the other end we'll just have to add a piece of yarn to sew it on. So I'm going to thread my needle, go through that last loop, snug that down, and now here's my bag, and I'm going to put 1 handle on each side. Make sure it's laying flat, so and put your handles on the sides. We're going to start with this side. There's where I tied off when I changed colors because I ran out of yarn. And you're going to just lay, sorry I grabbed the wrong end. You're going to just lay that handle right there in that corner, and you're just going to take your needle and make some loop stitches going through both thicknesses, the bag and the handle. And we're going to do a lot because you want to make sure your handle is not going to come off. And you just keep making those stitches. Make sure you go all the way to the edge, and then make loop stitches going right back the other direction. And I just keep doing it till my yarn runs out because I want my handle to stay put. Especially if I'm running through an airport or a store or something and it's full of yarn. Don't want to lose my yarn. All right, now we're just going to weave that in back and forth through those stitches and cut that off. And there's our first handle. And by stitching it that way, you get a nice seam there and it doesn't show. All right, so I need to cut a piece of yarn to sew on the other end. So I'm going to go ahead and thread that needle. And I'm going to turn my bag the other way. Now this is the end. I need to weave that in where we ended. And you need to make sure that you don't twist your handle. And put that handle right in the center. I'm just going to lay that over and stitch over that. And that'll make it so I can tie it off at the same time I'm sewing on my handle. And I've got this laid out flat so I don't twist my handle. Here's my yarn with my threaded onto my needle. And I'm going to go all the way to the end there, and I'm going to make another stitch through it and hold that thread down. And then I'm just going to go over both of those threads that were there, those pieces of yarn, and cover them up, stitching it on the same way that we did the other one. And that'll just grab those pieces of yarn. There we go. And then make sure that corner's down nice and tight, and then stitch back over it. And we can cut off all those pieces that are hanging out of the yarn. And I'll make a nice, tidy seam. There we go. And I'll just go through that yarn. Leave that off. I always go one way, then back the other. And if there's extra yarn on there, I might do it again. Alright, so we've got a couple pieces of yarn there just to snip off. And everything else was cut, and there's our nice seam. So here's our bag. It's our handle. And here's our bag, nice big bag. But it's a little bit naked. And so I need to tidy in this end that I didn't weave in. And then we're going to make a flower. And this is the flower that we're going to make. It's a 3-tiered flower. And then you can add a button of choice. So let me tidy up this end, and then I'll show you how to make that flower. So to make this flower, I decided I wanted it in 3 of the colors of the bag. And so I'm going to start with the pink and then do this darker pink and end with gray. So the way we begin, make our slip knot, and we're going to chain 3. 1, 2, 3. Then we're going to place 11 half double crochets in the 3rd chain from the hook, because the first 2 count as our first half double crochet. So we're going to place 11 more for a total of 12. And we're using half double crochet for the center because we're adding a nice big button. Usually I do single crochets, so if you're not adding a nice big button, you can do 12 single crochets instead of half double crochets. But I wanted the room for the nice big button. All right, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12. So we're going to join to the top of that chain 3. So we have our 12 half double crochets, and now we're going to make petals. So we're going to chain 2. We're going to place 3 double crochets in the next half double crochet. 1, 2, 3. Then we're going to chain 2, and we're going to slip stitch right in that same stitch. And then we'll slip stitch in the next and chain 2. 1, 2. So there's 1 petal. Then we're going to place 3 double crochets in the next stitch. 1, 2, 3, and chain 2. And now we'll place that slip stitch right in the same stitch, and then slip stitch in the next stitch and chain 2. And that's 2 petals made, and we'll do 4 more petals for a total of 6 petals. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 petals. We're doing our center row. So 3 double crochets in the next. 1, 2, 3, and chain 2. We'll slip stitch right in that same stitch. Then we'll slip stitch in the next stitch and chain 2. There's 3 petals made, and now we just need to make 3 more petals. And after we've done our 6th petal, we slip stitch in that last stitch. And if you're following the pattern, it only has a 6-petal flower, which works fine. But I want to show you how to make it into a 3-row 6-petal flower. So what you're going to do in order to have a place to stitch the next row on is we're going to chain 2, 1, 2. Then on the back, you've got those 3 double crochets in the center stitch of those 3 double crochets. 1, 2, 3. You're going to put your hook through. There we go. Got caught on a piece of yarn. And then you're just going to slip stitch, pull that through and pull that through like that, and chain 2. 1, 2. And we'll do the same thing on each petal. We'll go to that the middle double crochet, put your hook through, pull the loop through, and pull it through there, and chain 2. And what we're doing is we're making these little loops for us to have a place to put our petals in on the next row. So we chain 2. We're going to go to that middle double crochet, go through the back of that double crochet and slip stitch through, and then chain 2. And we'll do this all the way around. Chain 2, the middle double crochet, and remember, we're not going through the whole double crochet in the middle because we don't want it to show through. We're only going through the back. String out of the way so you can see how we're making kind of a little bridge, and that makes a place for the stitches to go. Alright, so we're going through the back. There we go. And we've gone through the back of all 6 of our petals and chain 2. And now we're just going to join to that first chain 2 with a slip stitch, and we're going to cut that yarn. Alright, so now we're going to join our next color. There we go. I'm going to use this gray for my second color. Alright, so we're going to join our second color. Like this. And we're going to go right in that chain 2 space that we made with a slip stitch, and then chain 2, and then we're going to stitch 3 double crochets right in that chain 2 space. 1, 2, 3, then we'll chain 2, and you're going to slip stitch right in that chain 2 space, and then you'll slip stitch in the next chain 2 space. And that's your first petal made. Now when you look on the front of it, you can see that that petal is offset between those two. And we'll do this all the way around. Chain 2, 3 double crochets in the chain 2 space. 1, 2, 3, chain 2, slip stitch in that chain 2 space, and then slip stitch in the next chain 2 space. So there's your second petal. Okay, so we're in the next chain 2 space. And we'll do the same thing. We slip stitched, chain 2, 3 double crochets, 1, 2, and 3. Then chain 2, slip stitch in that same chain 2 space, and then slip stitch in the next chain 2 space and chain 2. So there's our third petal made. And here's the back. The strings out of the way. Now you will have a few strings to weave in, but that's okay. And then we'll do that on the next 3 chain 2 spaces, slip stitch, chain 2, 3 double crochets, chain 2, slip stitch. So I did the second row of petals, and this is what the back looks like. Now I took a minute and I weaved in those 2 strings that were hanging out there just so it would be out of our way. Now your beginning string you want to keep because we're going to use that to sew the button on. And this is what it should look like after 2 rows. And then you're going to join to that first slip stitch that we made for the first petal to finish that row. And then for the third row, you're going to do exactly the same thing. Here's our third row. You're going to go in the center of the double crochet, chain 2, and do it all the way across, and then you'll do the third row exactly the same. And you'll notice 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 petals. And that offsets it to where it's at the same space as the pink one. But I'm not going to do it again because we already showed you how to do it, and you just do that again for the third row. So I'm going to go ahead and tie this one off. And when you get to your last row, I should not have cut this so short. You want to have a nice long piece because you're going to use this piece to sew it onto your bag. All right, now if you're going to have a button in the center, you're going to want to thread that piece of yarn and make sure you got a nice long piece to the top, and you just choose a button. I'm going to use this butterfly. It's a polymer clay butterfly that I made, and you're just going to go up and down a couple of times, just enough so that that button is going to stay put. That string out of the way. There we go. Got snagged. I guess that one's going to stay put. And then just weave that in the back. When I add a button, I almost always go ahead and add a knot. I'm just going to... There we go. And that's what it will look like with only 2 layers of flowers, of petals. So it will still look extremely pretty. I love the pink and the gray together. Now I want to show you how to sew on your flower. One thing I noticed about this yarn is it has this Bernat Pop. It has little pieces of places where it looks like the dye overran, and it happens to be right on the front of my bag. So I thought I'd put my flower right on there to cover that up. So I'm going to go ahead and cut a piece of yarn. Now if you didn't, when you tied off, you left a long piece of yarn, you can use that for sewing on, but make sure you match your last color. So just so that you understand how to do that, I'm going to hook this to here where I tied off. And we're just going to pretend like that's where I tied off, just so that you can understand how to do it. So put your flower where you want it. Now you may want to pin it, move it up just a smidge, or not. It's totally up to you. So what I do is I put my hand inside and I hold it and I look under here. And then I just go up and down inside that last row of petals, like that. Pull that up. That's why you want your yarn to match the last row of petals. There we go. And I just make nice big stitches. And the reason I do that is I want the bag, you know, when I fill it up, it's going to be stretchy, and I don't want the flower to be pulled tightly. I want it to stretch with the bag, basically. And I kind of go back and forth around that last row. And the neat thing about sewing it this way is the second row of petals, or if you only did 2 rows of petals, will cover those stitches. But if your bag's getting stretched a little bit, you got a bunch of yarn in here and it's going to stretch. You want your flower to have a little stretch and give and not tear that yarn or break that yarn. And that's all I do. I just go all the way around. And then I'll check under here. And if I have extra yarn, I'll just go ahead and make a few more stitches just so it stays put. And then I'll tie that off, going through quite a bit of yarn because we want it to stay put. And I used to worry about my yarn coming undone when I was doing tying off. And then one time I had a great big mistake that I had to undo. And I realized that I really do sew those on good because it was a pain to tear off. All right, so there is our flower. And even a 2-petal flower would look pretty on there. I might even put the second one on there just for fun. So this is our fat striped bag done in the Bernat Pop yarn.